So I'm curious to know what you thought about the article. Any comments, questions?
Well, I thought that there was an interesting chart on page 2 that sort of went through all the different intervention models, and I thought that it was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, that chart is very helpful, and as you'll recall, it offers a comparison of all the different models for change, and I'm wondering which ones you found most compelling. Tanya.
Yeah, to be honest, I couldn't really tell the difference between planned capacity development and capacity-centered development.
Yeah, I found that really confusing too. I think I might need an example.
Can anyone suggest an example that would illustrate that?
I know of an organization in my country of origin, Nepal, that would probably be considered to be using that strategy. Sometimes, however, this is very challenging. I've seen many problems with this organization caused by this idea of capacity-centered development.
Yeah, it is a very interesting example, but I think maybe it would be helpful to have a more local example that all of us could understand and maybe more familiar. So I'm thinking about neighborhood groups. Does that help? Any other thoughts? David?
Yes, Prof. I appreciated how the author stressed the merit in both the top-down approach in planning of formal organization and the more participatory forms of grassroots problem solving.
Ah, yes, correct. But the author also talks about the challenges involved in merging models.
Yes, certainly so. He says the challenge for social development can be mixing features of laissez-faire society that emphasize freedom with societies that emphasize system planning.
Does anyone know what that means? Tanya?
Okay.
Well, I think we can compare what the author is saying to the idea of time. So, for example, people from different cultures have different ideas about time, like Aboriginal people or people from Africa. For them, it's not as big of a deal to be late for a meeting, for example. And so I also think that means that they'll have different ideas about community development. So, like in the case, like maybe Rose, could you remind me where you're from?
Nigeria.
She and I probably have different ideas about time and community development. And so I think in essence what the author is wanting to say is that people who come from different paradigms will approach social change work differently.
There's a lot we could talk about in that, but I'm conscious of the time. So maybe, given that lunch is coming up, I'll just say that that was a good discussion. There were some very interesting comments made. And before we go, maybe we could just offer an opportunity for any of the African or Aboriginal students in the class who might want to respond to what Tanya said. Rose, would you like the last word? Okay. Well, then let's call it a day, and have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone. David, I wanted to say how impressed I was with the way you engaged with that article. It's a really difficult article, very academic language and pretty inaccessible, and you had a really good grasp of it. So good for you, and keep up the good work.
At the end of the class, I felt strange because judging from our nonverbal cues, I get it that it was not more of a compliment, it was something else. I get it that she was a bit surprised that I was able to answer the question that she posed out to the class.
I think when it comes to race, it's a very touchy thing for people. And a lot of time, even profs don't know how to deal with it because it's very messy. She might not want to say the wrong thing. She might not want to rock the boat. What if she says something and it leads to a big argument or something she's not able to contain in class? So I think she took the safe, like she made a safer decision, right? So she doesn't have to deal with what was going on. But at the same time, I think it's easier for her to just let it pass than to deal with it. So I think she should have done something about it.
So sometimes when Om is talking in class, I mean, I'm sure he has lots of relevant experience from Nepal. I mean, I know he had a really prestigious job there, but sometimes I just get so frustrated because we're in a Canadian classroom and I just want to understand what all the students are saying. I mean, I'm paying for my education and I'd like to get a good one so I can get a job.
I felt marginalized by the professor. It's frustrating to me that my experience doesn't seem to count at all. I worked for over 10 years in communities around the world, but the people don't want to hear it. The message I get is, if it's not Canadian, it's not good enough. Even if what I have to say is relevant and similar, people don't want to give it any importance.
I felt that cutting me off means that what I had to say was of no use, it's of no importance, and so it creates an uneven playing field for me because whenever I put my hand up and I'm cut off, it creates an impact and my learning capacity is being weighed down.
When Taya said what she said, I was surprised, I was upset, it's a lot of things coming, a lot of emotion at the same time, right? Like, okay, I thought this would be a good space that people would be more knowledgeable about other culture, that a race is a race, a person is a person, right? So, but that big overgeneralization was just, it was out of it. And I was expecting the prof to do something about it.
I know that we're not supposed to talk about, or we're not supposed to generalize people based on where they're from or groups that they belong to, but I mean, sometimes our experiences are similar.
And I think that's why I didn't say anything. I was overwhelmed with emotion at the moment, and then having to speak for everyone, all Africans, felt like, okay, it shouldn't be my place to do that in class.
I'm feeling bothered that from the motion she was making, that is nothing good going to come from me.
Okay, so you've heard the story now about what happened in the class. Yeah. And I'm feeling terrible. So I would really appreciate any feedback you've got for me.
Truthfully, I hear microaggressions.
Microaggressions?
Yes.
Okay, say more.
Well, microaggressions are things that members of a dominant group say. They can be things that they do, like at a nonverbal level, but that are kind of targeted at members of the non-dominant group. And they're demeaning, they're insulting, they're wounding.
Okay, as you're talking, I'm remembering a couple of things. One is that they don't need to be intentional. They can be unintentional.
They frequently are committed by really well-intentioned people.
Okay, and the other thing is that sometimes they're actually expressed as compliments,
Yeah.
but they're experienced as insults.
Because there's this negative meta message. Absolutely.
Oh dear, okay. Then I committed at least one that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And I was complicit in one or two others that a student did. So I've got some serious repair work to do.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.